believed that you had to lead with education or your nation would not survive. And so I just really appreciate all of the work that both Jennifer and Carla are doing with our youth. Now we're going to move a little more into the investment side, actual investment side, even though our kids are our investments. And Heather Thompson has given me a tough job here because she's an overachiever, and I cannot possibly properly introduce her. So I'm going to only do a short piece because you're gonna love learning from her. I learn from her every time I talk to her. So Heather is nationally recognized as a Native American lawyer and leader in Indian country. She's an economic development expert. She's an enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Nation. She is with the Indian law practice at Greenberg and, is it Trareg? And a principal now with Native American Capital. She's a specialist on tribal opportunity zones, which is very interesting and very new. It's called the Tribal Opportunity Zone Venture Group and 7 Generations Native Indoor Farms. So she's also doing indoor farming on the Pine Ridge Reservation. She's an author of the well-read piece, The Competitive Advantages of Doing Business with Native American Tribal Governments. Her resume is 2 more pages, which I cannot read, but the point being she went to Harvard Law, and she is one of our most accomplished Indian lawyers and Indian women, and I couldn't be more delighted to have her here with us today. You're going to learn so much from Heather. Come on up.
Does anybody in the room want to make money? Okay, that's what I'm here to talk about. I see a lot of familiar faces. How many of you already work in Indian country in some capacity? Okay. How many of you are on the investor side? Okay, not as much, but that's what we're going to talk about. So Teresa and I are going to really talk about the investor side and sort of demystifying this process and how do you make money in Indian country. And as Val said, it always drives me crazy. We have so much investment in emerging markets and third world countries, and we seem to think that, that is completely achievable in reducing that risk, but somehow Indian country is just a completely foreign entity and overwhelms us every time we start to have that conversation. So we're gonna talk through some of that. So hopefully we can demystify it. We can talk about some of the resources that are available, and we're going to talk to you about how to make some money. So while doing well as well, I have clients that are paying 20 to 24% for their debt right now, which is insane, absolutely insane in this country. But capital is so hard to access. In fairness, those are higher risk industries with the tribes. But it is so hard to access capital. And as Valerie said, she's done it for so many years and she finally just can't do it anymore because it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting because you're having the same conversation over and over again. It's not that scary. It's not that scary. I promise. Right? So that is what I do at Greenberg Trareg is I help demystify that risk. We help do the political analysis. We help do the legal analysis. We help put together creative collateral because, as Val said, the collateral is a little difficult with the land ownership issues. But there are ways to make these deals happen. There's a way to protect yourself from sovereign immunity. We do this all day, every day, and people are successful and they make money. So please don't be so overwhelmed by this. There's 1,000 Native American attorneys now that know this space, that have done these deals through gaming, that now can replicate them in this field, in this space. So my first thing is, why invest in Indian country? There's money to be made. I mean, the philanthropic side is super important, but in the long run, we have to be able to sustain ourselves. We cannot sustain our language programs, our cultural programs, our youth programs if we are not making our own money and if we don't have that economy. So we need you to have faith in us and help us make money, real money, long term. So that's number one, why invest in Indian country? 2, every investment is an impact investment. And what do I mean by that? Tribal nations have no tax revenue to run their governments. I want to say that one more time. Tribal nations have no tax revenue to run their governments. So they have all the same obligations as the state of California, the county, the city. They've got to have schools and roads and tax collection. And they have no tax base. If they have land, that land is largely in trust with the federal government and is non-taxable. There's no income tax, arguably. And the sales tax is a constant litigation battle with the state. So effectively, you can either get grants and run your government on grants, or you can depend on the federal government for a handout, neither of which sounds like a very good long-term strategy for running your government. So what do? You participate in the private marketplace, which is hard enough. I mean, can you imagine running the state of California by running a hotel and a grocery store and a gas station? But that is exactly what tribal nations have to do. So if I hear one more comment about casinos, I'm going to scream and rip my hair out. But that is participation in the private marketplace. You have to go out and own a grocery store, own a casino, own whatever it takes to give you a margin significant enough to pay for those schools, those cultural centers, those language preservation programs. And so while the Boys and Girls Club is about as sexy as a thing you can invest in, so please go that direction. But while those programs are absolutely necessary, we need a freaking gas station to pay for them long term, because your $5 is going to run out from the philanthropy side eventually. And so people don't think of these investments as being that exciting, but you have to help these tribes build that private economy and have these long-term investments in things that are going to be able to sustain themselves as governments and as people. So what we do is, in the back, the paper that Valerie referenced, so on the back table actually is this very short paper called The Competitive Advantages of Doing Business with Native American Tribes and Tribal Corporations. So it's not the easiest thing, but it can be the best thing, right? Because you're doing business with a tribal nation, largely. And guess who doesn't pay federal taxes? So if you structure this correctly, the portion of the business that's owned by the tribal nation doesn't pay any federal income taxes and can refeed into that business. So you're going to be making more money long term. That's just one example. There's also a series of tax incentives that the federal government has put in place for taxable investors to try and attract that capital, because it is so difficult to get the capital in. The most recent one, of course, is the opportunity zones. Have you guys talked about this ad nauseum, I think, right, at SOCAP thus far? So you know the basics of the opportunity zones. But I'm here to tell you that 20 to 30% of those opportunity zones are in Indian country. They're on Indian reservations. And as Val said, usually I'm on the legal side and I'm structuring these deals. But at my large law firm, what I'm seeing at Greenberg Traurig is these giant funds coming in, setting up investment parameters of $50 to $100 million that is going solely into real estate and is not going, in my opinion, to the purpose of this statute. And getting to these smaller businesses, these grassroots projects. So what I'm hoping that you guys here at SOCAP can help push people's limits on what they're thinking about in utilizing those opportunity zones. Because yes, in Indian country, we do have some of those larger infrastructure projects, but really, the majority of our projects are $2 to $5 million. They're an absolute sweet spot for some of these family offices, for some of these foundations. You have to be a little bit braver than the average investor. You have to be a little bit more creative than the average investor. And trust us that it's not so scary. And we can help reduce your risk and increase your profit. So if there's one thing that we have this other handout in the back. So like I said, I don't normally get in on this side of it, but I was watching all this money. My friend just walked in that we've been talking about these opportunity zones. But I'm watching all of this money leak out the door at Greenberg Traurig to these large funds, and none of it being targeted towards Indian country. So on Tuesday, my friends and I that are in the finance world, we just started our own company in order to make those matchmaking between the investors and the opportunity zones in Indian country to make sure at least some of that is being diverted to these Indian country opportunity zones. And most of these are going to be some in your smaller range, like I said, that I think are really good matches for a lot of the investors in SOCAP. So Valerie wanted me to give you some examples of projects, and I think Teresa's going to go into some specific examples of where she's been as an investor. As I said, the tribes have to make money where they make money. So anything you can think of that you're interested in investing in, you can partner with a tribe and they will probably also be interested. And you can structure it so that you can take best advantage of their tax incentives for investing with them and their non-taxable status. We've got everything from $1 to $2 million to, I think my favorite project of the week is we have a tribal-owned corporation who has a $1 trillion+ project, which is a substitute. It's an indigenous design substitute to the border wall. It's a green design that takes the place of it and is an alternative to the Panama Canal so that we don't get choked out of trade by China on the Panama Canal. And I said, you know what, that is just crazy enough to work. And everybody they've showed it to thus far has been really well received. So that just shows you the creativity when you put indigenous minds together. Renewable energy. Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. They are trying to build a totally self-sustained community. I know Nick was building one on Pine Ridge as well. They all have microgrid components to them to keep that self-sustainability. We also have a client of 7 tribes, 7 Sioux Lakota tribes in North and South Dakota that have come together to build a utility-scale wind project. It's about $15 million for the first tranche that they're trying to raise. Grassroots projects, ones that are a really good, nice cultural match. People get excited about these. They're great projects. Native indoor farms. We have a huge movement in Indian country for sustainable local agriculture, right? Self-sufficiency. When the United States was not winning the military war, they destroyed our food economy. They destroyed the buffalo. They distributed food and made our peoples dependent upon the federal government for survival. So there's a giant cultural movement already going for food sustainability. The problem is it's largely grant-based at this moment, right? And so how do we create that so it's sustainable? So native indoor farms is all about leapfrogging the problem of not owning our own land. That's another conversation, but the best, most arable lands on our reservations were given to non-native farmers. So let's just skip that. Let's create our own indoor farms. What's the tipping point? What do we have to grow from a microgreens or pharmaceutical greens standpoint, ship that out, make money on that, make enough profit to pay back our investor, and keep a certain percentage for a local grow, for our local fruits and vegetables, maybe 10, 20%. So that's working on that right now, and that's intended to be scalable for each of these reservations. Find that magic point, and then eventually, when your investors are paid off, shift that ratio so that you have a larger local self-sustaining grow of healthy foods. Another one, which is a really nice cultural match. I'm from the Cheyenne River Sioux. We're Lakota. We have a very strong warrior culture. And so we have a local grassroots company who is creating a for-profit fire jumping wildland fire company. And the goal of that one is to make enough money when you're going out that it can help subsidize the local structural fire department, because we don't have local fire departments because we have no tax base. So they go out, make money fighting fires here in California, make enough profit to pay their own folks, pay back the loan, and then subsidize their local structure fire. And then I've got another tribe that's, so that one's about 2 to 3 million. Sorry, I'm leaving off that. The indoor farm is about 3 to 6 each farm, 3 to 6 million each farm. The native fire jumper company, they're looking for about 2 to 3 million. The next one is a tribally owned bison herd. You've got a lot of tribes that are trying to work on prairie preservation to raise their buffalo in a traditional manner, and no feedlots, all grass-fed. All Ted Turners are feedlotted, sorry, just so you guys know. So this is more expensive buffalo, but it's better for the environment. So they're looking to expand a $10 to $20 million profitable project. We have significantly more demand for buffalo than can be met. There's anybody who's interested in investing in buffalo ranches, buffalo much better for the environment in general than cattle. We have a demand that significantly outstrips the current supply of buffalo in the United States that are able to meet that. And then if you're just looking more for good profit margin investments, the 3 companies the 3 industries that are in most demand in these large rural areas, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is the size of Connecticut. My reservation is about the size of Connecticut. They're extremely rural. They're never going to make a dime on gaming. You know, you've got to use what you've got. So one, a lot of people are going towards e-commerce. So if you're interested in e-commerce and locating them in low tax areas, any e-commerce idea you've got a partner in Indian country that's interested in that, number one. Two, the less sexy investments, but they have higher rates of return in these very rural areas because this is what people buy. There's not that many different industries that people are going to spend their money on. One, gas stations. The number one thing, gas stations and C-stores. These are very remote areas. Got to have a gas station to get around where you're going. They have good returns. I don't know a single tribe that doesn't need a good gas station. And these are all, $2-3 million range. Fast food, not the sexiest thing, but not the healthiest thing, but in great demand. Obviously open to healthier options. Subway's really growing on a lot of reservations. But some sort of healthy fast food chain desperately needed. Almost no food options in most of these rural reservation areas. And then third, farm supply stores. A lot of tribes are looking to own farm supply stores and in-house that. Everybody's driving off reservation, sometimes 2-3 hours away in order to obtain. These are good businesses with good profit margins to get sort of basic farm supplies. And those are all sort of under, depending upon obviously the size, 2 to 5 million investments. So those are not only concrete examples, those are like actual clients that I work with that called me yesterday when they said Heather had an opportunity zone company that I have the contact information for. I mean, these are real investments, these are real people, these are real projects, and they are really doable. So if I can leave you with that, this is completely achievable and good investment. Thank you.
I told you she was amazing.